Welcome to the Finance and Measure I Oversight Committee meeting of July 15th, 2025. It is 5:30 p.m. Shall we stand and salute the flag? Councilmember Busby, would you lead us, please? Salute. Flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, the roll call.
Vice Mayor Thomas,
Here.
Councilmember Busby.
Present.
Thank you.
Okay, moving straight into item 4, public comment and consent. Individuals wishing to address the committee regarding consent items or matters not on the agenda are asked to complete a speaker card and submit it to the city clerk. All remarks shall be made directed to the committee members and limited to 3 minutes. By law, the committee cannot discuss or take action on items not listed on the posted agenda. Do we have any public comment this evening? Hearing none, we'll go to item 4A, minutes approval. Recommended action, approve the April 15th, 2025 meeting minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Yes, I will second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, discussion and action. All matters on the discussion and action calendar will be discussed and acted upon individually. Individuals wishing to speak on these items are asked to complete the speaker card and submit it to the city clerk. Comments should be directed to the committee members and limited to 3 minutes. By law, the committee cannot discuss or take action items not listed on the posted agenda. First item 5A would be finance policies. Recommended action, review and discuss the city's various policies, recommended amendments as necessary, and present any updates and recommendations to the full council. Marty Brown.
Good evening, Vice Mayor and Council Member. This item before you is, as you may recall from the bylaws for this newly established committee last fall, is to, in the July Finance Committee, to review any policies, financial policies we have. The 4 policies that are attached to the staff report are the ones that the city has. I do want to note, just historically, all 4 of these policies were written, prepared, and approved by council over the course of roughly a year, from about the summer of 2020 to about the spring of 2021. And that was for a very specific reason, not just because the city didn't have any policies prior to that, but the city was also in the midst of forming a pension obligation bond to fund its unfunded pension liability, as well as preparing for certificates of participation for its sewage bond. Both of those bonds and bond lenders like to see financial policies that guide the governing body in terms of, general fund reserve, debt service, and pension funding, among other things. And so at the time, the council in 2020, 2021, which all 4 of these were established and approved slightly just before I started with the city of Willows, those were done specifically with that intent. Of course, it's also just a good idea to have financial policies, but the motivation at the time was for these 2 bonds that were being prepared and executed at the time. In particular, and I know you've already written about this, Vice Mayor Thomas, an email earlier today, but I did want to call your attention to the general fund reserve policy and just note that, interestingly, I had highlighted the sections around the catastrophic reserve and budget stabilization reserve. I also spoke with our finance consultant earlier today, Andy Heath, about these reserves, because in my experience, as well as the capital reserve, which is also listed in here and you mentioned in your email as well, Vice Mayor Thomas, those are often seen in larger cities with a larger general fund reserve than we have. I think our reserve is so relatively small that parsing it out into different subcategories, A, it's not necessary. B, it's just kind of another sort of red tape, if you will, because given the circumstances and how small the reserve is, we may have to take from one reserve fund to help out another reserve fund, depending on what's going on in the city, whether there's need to stabilize the budget with cash flow funds, or there's a catastrophic situation. Again, our reserves are relatively small, and I frankly don't think it's necessary at this time to create a bunch of subcategories. We already have a capital reserve, which has also been languishing since before I got here, and even before Joanne started with the city. I asked Andy about it. It's got $5,000 in it. I was like, why are we doing this? He said, I don't know, but we don't have time to clean this up right now. So we're just going to keep doing what's been doing. But frankly, I would like to remove all of these different subcategories and just have a general fund reserve for now. And in the future, if there is substantial funds that warrant separating it out into separate line items and we can afford it as a city, then that's worth taking a look at. But I just don't think we have enough reserve that it warrants all these subcategories. Other than that, I think most of the other policies in the packet are fairly standard. And the one thing I did note is I can't remember which policy it is now, but there is a regular report that we are supposed to be providing, treasurer's report, I believe it is. And that is something that we need to start doing. And when we get to the next item, we can talk about that in a little bit more detail. I have some thoughts about some of the items in item 5B when we get there. So that concludes my presentation on 5A.
Thank you. Do you have any comments you'd like to offer first? Or
Yeah, I think having, even if it's the same fund amount, there's a certain amount of accountability, especially on the council side, earmarking specifically an asset replacement. I think we kind of talked a lot about that at our goals and everything like that, our goals and vision planning and everything. I understand the trepidation to not over earmarking funds to pigeonhole yourself into not being able to spend when you need to spend, should something really terrible happen. I would like to think a little bit about specific to that asset replacement, only because it's a guarantee where we're at as a city, and as far as our depreciable assets and everything like that. We know that there's going to be recurring replacements that are going to be happening over the next 1 to 5 years. So in that way, I think that it does make a certain amount of sense to at least have something just broken down for that. I do agree that, like, hey, if we have like 3 or 4, it's a little silly. My other question that I would have on this is in the policies and procedures specific to the general fund, not getting into how how the policy was set to break it up. It says, okay, hey, we as a council are going to do general fund replenishment at a term of 1 to 5 years. Like, there's a lot of vagueness to that. And I know that that was a priority that we did set as part of the vision and goals, but I can't remember, did we ever commit to a hard number or a hard payback plan? Like, hey, let's say we're going to do it over 5. Hey, how much money are we allocating from the budget to general fund reserves? Or did we do this? I can't remember, and I didn't look in time for the budget. Like, did we just say, hey, budgeted, we've got a surplus, and right now that surplus is going into or into general fund reserves? How much of that is actually going there versus, like, how much are we holding ourselves accountable to putting the 1 to 5 year payback plan in?
I don't recall that you committed to. I'd have to go look at the priorities document that was approved. I don't recall you committing to a set number. What I do recall is talking about the fact that for a city this size, typically a 25 to 30% reserve would be standard, while the GFOA, the Government Financial Officers Association, only requires, it's not the right term, but they only suggest or recommend 17%. And I think that, in my conversations with Andy Heath, our finance consultant, over the 7 years I've known Andy, has been always that, the 17% works for a bigger city, maybe, medium-sized city of 100 to 200,000. But when we're this small and the revenue and expenditures are so tight, most smaller cities, most finance directors like Andy will tell you 25 to 30% is better. So I think that that was the goal to get to that because that's not where we are today, right? Of course. But I don't recall you committing to X amount over X period of time. And I can certainly research that and have an answer for you at the October Finance Committee meeting.
Is that something that we should, is that something that we as a finance committee should recommend to the full council to agree to after the budget? Or is this something that we need to be looking into for fiscal year 26, 27?
I would recommend that you look at it for the next fiscal year and if you want to discuss it, then put it on as an action item at the October meeting. So it's in plenty of time for the next fiscal year and then bring it forward in a month or two after that to the council. And I think we're gonna, be really frank with you. I think it's important to have those goals. I do think that with all the competing demands for the city, it is going to be very challenging to reach a 25 or 30% general fund reserve within 1 or 2 years. I don't see that happening probably.
Well, and that's kind of my point is I agree. So like the less structure we put around it, the more opportunity for optics problems as well as hey, let's hold everybody up here accountable to. Nope, we said 5 years. Whatever it is, whatever we agree to, or whatever. I think the setting, building the sandbox.
Yeah, I think that that's a good idea. I definitely think the 5 years is a better time range than the 1 or 2 years. Also, just want to comment on your apparatus reserve. I didn't mention that because you did already approve that, and we are getting ready to, over the next 3 to 6 months, implement and literally make a project fund for that and do that. And I don't see that quite the same as these other general fund reserves. That's a very specific fund for being able to purchase future apparatus. So you did as a council already approve that, and that is on our radar to create that fund.
Well, a 25% reserve is roughly $1.5 million. Maybe 1.8, 1.75, something in that. If my memory serves me right, with the money we're putting in that from this budget into the reserves, we're going to be somewhere around 5.5, 600,000. So a 5-year plan would be looking at roughly $200,000 a year for the reserve to bring that up to 25%. And I don't know if that necessarily would be unachievable. So I think we do need to take a serious look at how we might build that to 25%, whether it be 4 years or 5 years, and what that actual number would be. And I know the general fund expenses will continue to grow, unfortunately, as much as we try to retain a hard line on our costs. So one of the commitments we made with Measure I was to rebuild that reserve. So I think we need to seriously look at if we can't put some policy in to try to get to that 5-year number, at least in 5 years. If we're 6 years from now, I think we failed as a council. So I think we need to try to push that to a 5-year, 25% reserve.
Assuming there's not any more staff increases beyond what was approved this year for a while, I think some of the biggest expenses for the city are going to be apparatus and vehicles and deferred maintenance and that kind of thing. And, those are one-time expenses, but some of them are pricey, and that can definitely put a damper on rebuilding a general fund reserve to 25% over 5 years. Is it not worth trying? No, of course we should try, but I just want to be realistic about what's possible given, like I said, the amount of deferred maintenance in the city.
That's the other thing that I think I would say about that is, hey, we're scheduled to, or we're budgeted to have a pretty healthy surplus this year, but there are guardrails onto how we can allocate those funds in that surplus. And like, we may not have a choice. Like, hey, if it's a one-time funding, non-recurring, okay, yeah, we can go out and buy a pickup truck or put money back in the savings account. But I think being, it's going to come down to how we budget for it, I think, over the next handful of years.
And I would support taking this reserve policy back to the council and eliminating the catastrophic and budget stabilization and bring that into one. The current policy says the city may also set aside a capital reserve in special projects. Well, special projects would be our apparatus.
Yeah, it could be, sure.
So we could leave capital in special projects and leave capital unfunded if that's what we choose to do until we really get our feet on the ground. But let's say in 5, 6, 7 years from now, things are wonderful and we've actually grown some economically. We could maybe start building a capital reserve account. But
Mhm.
today I wouldn't want to take it out, but I would think it's May. But I think the special project reserve certainly could be the apparatus because we've all agreed to that. And eliminate the catastrophic and budget stabilization and make it a whole because it is one number.
Mm-hmm. Right, it is.
And at the same time, we could then get the council's total understanding and agreement of building to that 25% reserve.
You do have, just to note that there is a capital reserve of $5,000. Again, I inherited it. We never touched it, but I don't know what it's for. Andy's never known what it's for. You probably don't know what it's for. It's just there. I
Well,
would
capital
again,
is an interesting term.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So what is capital? I think a fire truck's capital.
it is it is considered.
So I
capital.
would say in that same effort, let's move that 5,000 capital into the asset replacement.
Just get rid of one of the accounts. It's all going.
But
to the same
leave
place.
capital open for future use.
Well, I mean, when you need it, you'll create it. That doesn't.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
it says
creating a
it may
line
happen,
item.
so we can just leave it there. And special projects reserve is our asset replacement and we just combine a general fund reserve of 25% is the goal.
Okay. So you want that to come back in the October meeting for approval, and then after that, take it to the council? That's what I would recommend that
Is
you,
that how that would go? It has to come back to us?
I think it would be better, if it came back and we turn this, like if I corrected this document to show a single general fund reserve with the asset and you're approving that document and then taking it as a recommendation to the full council.
Doesn't feel great to wait till October. Is there any way we could call a special meeting just to like agendize it, get it cooking to the full council?
If you want me to,
Does it affect anything?
no, if you're directing me to just bring back what we just talked about to the full council, we can do that.
I would direct that, but it doesn't have to be tomorrow. It doesn't have to be this.
Yeah.
It could be,
But it won't be on the July 22nd, trust me. Yeah.
it could be August or even September, but I wouldn't want to wait much past September
Okay.
since we only have the one meeting in August. Then the investment policy, I think I would like the full council to receive that quarterly report or a report that shows what we have and where it's invested. The investment instructions makes fairly good sense. It's all tied to being secure and safe, which does lower your return investment, but there are some opportunities for longer term certificates of deposit. And right now, I don't think the whole council understands where all that money is and what the return is. So I think as soon as we could, let's bring that back to the full council so they can understand where we are.
So I also talked to, this is kind of jumping ahead, but item 5B, the number 5, review bank statements and investments. This is
Yes.
related to that. So I talked to Andy about it and he said, I'm not sure what that would provide because it's like a snapshot. If I show you the bank statement, it's just a snapshot in time. It doesn't show you the ebb and flow of what happens, money coming in, going out over the course of a year. But if we finish reconciling our bank reconciliations in preparation for the audit and then run a treasuries report, I think that would be more valuable both for that item and for the investment one that you're talking about, for the investment policy, where we can run the Treasury's report as well as item number 5, the investment piece would be a little different. I see that, I see how you want to see that, but just seeing bank statements isn't going to tell you much, but investment statements will tell you something, and we can get those together for the October.
Well, the bank
meeting.
statements is a harken back to my private life, where you take a look at the bank statements, you can see the money coming in and the money going out. And you then be able to look at checks and all the other stuff. Not something that I would ask you folks for that, but just putting a separate set of eyes is just good business in my thought process from my private sector, that we see where the money comes in and money goes out. And that was the reason I said bank statements. Wasn't specifically looking at,
Literally our Umpqua bank statement every month.
just trying to make sure that some council members' eyes are actually on the cash flow purchase. If you have a cash flow analysis that it prints out,
We think
I'm
we
used to
can
a
do that.
trial balance. I never thought I could believe this, but I lived and died by my trial balance. It was more important to me than my profit and loss statement, because it told me where my money went.
Mhm.
So that was my thought process.
So
Not
that would be the
specific-
Treasury's report for us, and we can definitely run that. But as Andy pointed out today, until we do our bank reconciliations for this past fiscal year, it won't be very helpful. So I think we need to finish that. We're going to be the auditors. We just scheduled them for mid-October. So we will have to have everything reconciled by about mid-late September. So probably in time for the next finance committee, we could run a Treasury's report and probably be able to provide that to you.
Okay.
Out of curiosity, traditionally, in government, how often are the efficacy of investments like looked at? Especially in the last couple of years, like 1 or 2% is a big deal.
Right. If we had more people, especially when I arrived, we would have done more of that. But we didn't really start to look at the investments until actually shortly before Joanne started. Andy recommended, as did another financial advisor, to put about $250,000 into CDs, into a 1-year, 3-year, and 5-year, and about $250,000 in each at, varying from 4 to 5%. We did that. At the same time, other ones were terminating and ending, and we saw how the finances looked in the city, and so we took those monies out because we needed the cash flow. So actually, Andy and I just spoke very late this afternoon, and he said, it's going to take more time for me to look at where things are right now. Typically we put money into a CD for 1, 3, and 5 years. That's what most cities, that's the kind of investment that they do. So are we looking at it every day? No, because it's tied up in a CD. But when it, comes to fruition and I get contacted by the investor and they say, Marty, I could put you in this or that, or for this interest. I mean, that's the time when we sort of here have looked at what do we want to do. The challenge has been, though, that because we've been slowly just, bleeding the general fund reserve until recently and losing money, we started last year as they matured. We ended up taking them out.
Liquidated them.
Yeah, we liquidated them. Yeah. So again, I can confirm with you exactly how, I don't think we have a lot, but maybe $750,000 to $1 million in at most in CDs. I think that we need to revisit that again now that money's starting to come in and preparing for next year. But we're government, so we don't take huge risks. We do things like CDs, right? We don't, we're not doing high-end AI investment or something like that.
Not unless you're managing the Public Employee Benefit Fund, right?
Right. Or you just got a big contract with your grok at federal government, something like that.
That's fine. So are those monies the same monies that would be in our impact fund accounts? We get to invest those too, or is that part of,
Impact Fund accounts. Oh, you mean like
like the
impact?
300,000 we have for entryway, freeway?
Yes,
So
because
that,
those monies, I mean, they're, Joanne can probably speak to this better than I can, but, although those monies are in one bank account, they're in the general fund, but they're lined out in the budget. The physical budget is, oh, these are park impact fees. We don't have separate accounts for everything. So yes, it's all mixed
separate bank
together.
accounts, but we have separate ledger accounts.
Correct, yeah.
Separate funds.
Okay.
It's like the same thing with the library trust funds. I was recently asked for bank statements for each of the trusts. It's like, we don't make a bank account for each of your trust funds. They're all together in one place. But in the ledger, they show up as each trust has X
Yeah, they're
amount of
just
dollars.
journaled as, yeah.
Right, exactly.
So
So,
what's the policy for allocating interest accrual to those funds?
to the trust funds?
Yes.
That's a good question. I don't have an answer for that. I'd have to investigate that. I don't know if that's something
That
we,
is policy.
So I can understand you escrow had one escrow account, but you had 400 depositors to that account, but you had ledgers for each one of them. So if it's interest bearing, I would assume somewhere along the line, especially if it's a static fund that hasn't had a whole lot of activity in it, there would be an allocation of earnings off that back to that account, I would assume.
well,
I don't
and
know
the,
the policy behind the impact fees and funds, whether they could actually, do they go back to them, or does the earnings on that go to the general fund, or what's the law? I don't know.
well,
I
I
have to
do,
defer to staff.
I know that the trust funds for the library, they're spending interest. How exactly that's calculated, I don't know that answer to that. But I know that some of those trust funds, they're not, according to the guidelines for each fund, they each all have different guidelines. Most of them, you're not allowed to spend the lump sum. You're only allowed to spend the interest.
Right.
But I don't know exactly how the interest is
It'd
calculated.
almost be
That's-
logical to take like the library trust funds and open one individual account at a bank for a CD that pays X percent, and only the interest gets raked off because you can't touch the principal.
Mhm.
And then you would have a definitive number.
Well, when you set up the trust, it's the statements that you get, they break it down for that because this trust is, that's why it's so expensive to set up a trust. The trust is structured in a certain way, and then your statements will kind of break it down the way in which it's structured. But I think it makes a tremendous amount of sense that they shouldn't be multiple accounts because compounding interest doesn't work that way. You want them all in one big pile of money because they earn more money. But yeah, the way it's broken down on the, but I think it's whoever's the manager of the trust has to pull those.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we have very little involvement with the trust funds other than they're in our bank account and we can run a line item that just shows you the balance in each of them, but we don't do a budget for them. I mean, they don't really make it into the city's budget other than to say, we could say, this trust has this amount of money, but beyond that, we don't do any budgeting or managing of those funds. And,
Except investing,
Um,
if it's lumped together.
correct. Yeah, I don't know how exactly how that exactly works, because what Councilmember Busby just said about like that there's the people that manage the trust are the ones that are involved. So it might be possible that we're not investing those and they are. I don't have any idea. Do you have any idea? No. I'd have to investigate that. I
I
don't
think
know.
Friends of the Library is the managing director of the trust, the way I understand it. And so
There's multiple trusts, so they're the managing director of all of them.
yeah, and they should be getting separate statements and it's pretty much principal that you're not allowed to touch, your interest earnings and our fees for managing it for you. It's going to be pretty simple statement, but yeah, whoever who's the signer on those accounts typically, effectively is the answer, is the question, and that person has the statements that you're wanting.
I don't know. Lori has a question.
Lori, they can't be heard.
You'd mentioned the library trust funds and that it would be the Friends of the Library. That's a separate nonprofit corporation. It would be the library board, the advisory board that manages those trust funds,
Okay,
not the Friends of the Library.
so I have it back.
Two separate,
Okay,
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions about that? The only other thing is that I brought it up in an email to Marty just before the meeting was debt management. Our only debt that we have other than pension obligation bonds was for the LOC that we took out for cash flow, right? And that's,
That hits the general fund, yes, those are the only
that's to
two.
be paid off this year.
I think, yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but yes.
And I don't know whether it's prudent at this point in time, but we have some major
Yeah.
apparatus that needs to be fixed or replaced, from a street sweeper to a jet truck to a fire engine and some of the other stuff. And reading this made me think, is there a reason perhaps that we could finance and buy those things today or within a reasonable length of time? Because I know we're spending money to maintain those.
Mhm.
And with the cost to maintain the existing stuff that's falling apart, help offset the interest charges for borrowing that. But if we wait till we have the money to actually replace the street sweeper that's already 10 or 15 years beyond its life expectancy, and the jet truck, if that thing were to fail today, that would be a catastrophic cost to us, the street sweeper, for example. So it was just something that I thought maybe we should actually start to think about. Is there prudence? I'm not a big fan of taking on debt, but also we don't have the one-time purchase ability, but maybe buying it and then getting it covered over the next 5-7 years when these things have a 15, 20-year life expectancy might be prudence. I don't know. It's just a question that I wanted to bring up, and maybe I should bring it up in the council comments instead of here.
Yeah, my response to that is we are always thinking about what's breaking next. So no need to worry there. We're thinking about.
I'm sure you are.
But I confirmed with the fire chief that there is not absolute confirmation of the grant from
Understood.
Congressman
Might
Lamalfa's
have to
office.
wait for all of this to
So-
go through.
Don't want to wait, don't want to do anything until that's a sure thing.
Right.
Because that we'd have to supplant that with general fund if it's not a sure thing. And then I think, we need to do that kind of an analysis before the budget process of, okay, that's a sure thing. We don't have to spend that on fire truck money. What's over here that we need to do that's the most pressing thing? Does it make more sense to do a, lease to own option, to buy it outright? Do we have enough money to do that? I mean, that's all kind of analysis that I frankly wouldn't do right now. I mean, we just got an approved budget and we're just focused on implementing and executing the current budget and getting a little further into the fiscal year and then start looking at those things when the cash flow is better and we've kind of turned the corner on the new year.
Well, it
And
might be
that's
something
typically
that
how
we
I
have
do
to
it.
look to the next fiscal year and consider putting something like that in the budget for the next fiscal year, because those things will have to be replaced. It's not,
Correct.
it's not if, it's a reality.
That is correct. Yes. But, like I said, there's a lot of analysis on our side as staff that we need to do in order to bring forward options that have been fully vetted. And just talking about it here, I don't have answers for you
Well,
because
I
we haven't
wouldn't
done that
expect you to.
analysis yet.
Wouldn't expect you to. It's just something that I wanted to have initial conversation, because I think it's something that we really should look at as far as the quality of our equipment. Because if it's that bad and it takes staff 2 or 3 hours to get it ready to roll, each time it rolls, that's a cost. The repair costs, fuel efficiency, the tires, and all the other things that need to be replaced starts to play in a factor. And I think we should seriously look at, we can't afford a one-time expense of whatever it costs to buy a street sweeper, 400,000, 250,000. I
Something
have
like
no
that,
clue.
yes.
I don't even know what one costs.
A lot.
More
I-
than it should.
We know what a truck costs anymore,
Right?
so I can't imagine what a street sweeper would cost. And the efficiencies that it might bring forth, as well as a jet truck. I mean, most people don't understand what a jet truck does,
Right.
or a leaf pickup truck. And I know we had a clutch problem and some of that other stuff. So I know we have equipment that needs to be replaced. And maybe the best way to get that replaced is to use revenue from our Measure I to replace those things and cover the costs of getting them in service. It's a thought.
No, it's a good thought, and we will take a look at that over
So
the
not
next several
tonight,
months.
But let's put that on the radar and see if that's not something that we should be looking at for the next fiscal year, at least by then.
Understanding what the math problem is, at least, like, we don't have to make a decision off of it, but it's a math problem, right? Like, hey, asset costs, interest, term, right? We can table it all out and see what our floor is of what the threshold for paying. Want to know that before we're staring at a piece of equipment that's on fire.
Well, it just makes sense to me. I know I had to upgrade my computer system in 2000 or 1999 because of Y2K. I had just bought my company, so I did not have the cash to buy new computers. So I had to finance them, but it was a necessary evil. I start to see some of our aged equipment as a necessary evil
Mhm.
in that regard. Any public comment on this item? Hearing none, we'll move to item 5B.
If I could, before we do that, I just want to clarify that you want brought back to the full council before your October meeting, a revision to the general fund reserve policy that removes catastrophic reserve and budget stabilization from that policy and highlights the asset replacement reserve fund and puts the capital reserve fund, leaves it there, but puts it at zero for the time being. I don't know, or we could just leave it in the policy. We don't need to do anything in the budget because we're talking about the policy right now. And then in the other three policies, were there any changes? That's all focused, what I just said is focused on the general fund reserve policy.
I think
It sounded like you just want you want a treasury's report and you want to see statements about investments.
I'd like to start moving toward us as a council committing to a payback schedule to this. Hey, if it's 5 years, let's commit to it as a budgeted item.
Like the
for-
general fund reserve building up to
Right.
25% of.
And
That
quite frankly,
should
the
be in the
pension
policy.
funding policy, I would have to read that and study a little bit more about CalPERS to understand, to make any logical, practical. And I'm not ashamed to say that some of what they're talking about might be a little bit beyond my initial grasp.
Me too. Very,
It feels purposefully confusing.
it is.
Mhm.
And
Like
if
a
you talk,
PG&E bill, they don't want you to know what you're paying.
and if you talk to CalPERS, they will agree with you that it is equally confusing.
So I don't have anything, and the debt management policy is just one of those things that the council has to agree to the debt if we take any on.
Right.
So at that point in time, we go back and study it, the debt policy at that time. So,
Okay. I think I have my marching orders for 5A.
but I would move the 5,000 from the capital to,
Just general fund reserve.
would be my recommendation to the asset replacement fund,
Oh, to F.
Yeah.
Oh, I
because
did.
it's a capital purchase.
Right. Yes. Okay. Perfect.
And it
Okay.
might be used to make a repair to that street sweeper when it breaks down.
That could be a thing.
Okay, now we'll go to 5B. Other financial updates, recommend action, discuss, clarify objectives, and direct staff to prepare additional information for the October FMIOC regarding the status of Measure I revenues and expenditures, revisit fiscal year 24, 25, versus 25-26. Update on current pending projects for financial perspective. Status review of apparatus replacement fund and review bank statements, which we've already had a general conversation. You have anything to add to that?
So the status of Measure I revenues, you want to share this information with them? So on the dais for you is a detailed report as well as a schedule, and Joanna will share with you the highlights of that.
We have received 2 payments thus far, one for 932 and one for a little over 140,000. You can see from the schedule, I printed it out because we get payments generally every month and how it goes back, and then how you get like next month when we are in August, we will get a cleanup from this past quarter, which was April, May, June. So I will see more funds come in next week.
Because that's substantially less than what we projected per quarter.
Right, but also you have to remember, these are kind of estimates.
Okay.
Not property tax, sorry. Sales tax returns are due on July 31st for the period of April, May, June.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So once everybody gets those done, that's where you see the cleanup happen. When you
Okay.
get that sweep of what they missed. And I can guarantee you a lot of people did miss the increasing it, because I would hand count them on invoices that we received. And they didn't switch. So it's unfortunate, because a lot of businesses are going to have to pay out of pocket instead of just a liability account that they had sitting
Right.
for taxes that they collected. So I don't.
So I think this report isn't like indicative of what we're going to see moving forward.
No.
Like next year, this time, that report will probably look very different.
We will have a much better, vision of how it is going to be after we get a few quarters in. But you have to wait until a month after the quarter ends to get those, the sweeping of it, the cleanup, if you will.
Plus, people are clearly still getting the hang of this whole new
Yes.
1.5%. So
Yes.
by next year, they better have the hang of it, or they're going to be in deep trouble.
Well, they will after they submit their tax returns on July 31st,
Right?
because it's going to show a huge,
Yeah.
negative.
They'll
for
get the
them.
hang of it real fast
They
after
will.
that, right?
I
Yeah.
think so.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have $141,201 and an additional $932, so roughly $142,000. And we expect a bunch more in September.
We'll see what happens next month when we receive the cleanup payment from.
Oh,
this
so it's
quarter.
supposed to be
Or out.
August 21st to August 8th, something 26th. Okay.
So moving forward, I think what we'll plan on doing is just as part of the packet is, since this is the Finance and Measure I Oversight Committee, is run a report from here on out of whatever we got between the 2 Finance Committee meetings between July and October. So you can see the sum total every time.
Okay.
We'll just do that as a standard thing. Now, the expenditures, I did want to talk to you about that. And I wanted to share with you how I'm going to handle that. So when you have a $1.4 million structural deficit that we would have been facing this year had the sales tax not passed, figuring out where you're spending it is challenging. So the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to back my way into it and say, well, if this didn't pass, we'd be an all volunteer fire department. We'd be a contract public works department. And it's going to be a little bit shocking, but there's no other real way for me. It's not like what we're using this money for. A lot of it, a big chunk of it, is just to keep the city as is with 18 full-time employees, or soon to be, I think we're getting 2 more at some point in this fiscal year, full-time, 20 employees. So the only way for me to show you expenditures is to back into it from the perspective of what would we have had if it didn't pass? And that's what we ended up with. And so it's going to be, frankly, the picture is going to be a little ugly. And I think some people will be shocked by it. It's going to take me a minute to figure it out, because these scenario conversations of like, well, last year we were like, well, what if it doesn't pass? What are we going to do? And we talked about disincorporation. Many of you remember that conversation. And then different department heads had different conversations about like, well, what do you think about this idea? And, like everybody be contract employees in public works and maybe they only work 2 or 3 days a week because that's all we can afford. Or, those are the kinds of conversations we were having last year if we weren't going to do the disincorporation option, which started to look, as you may recall, more and more difficult and unlikely. So the only way for me to show you what we're spending is, what we would have had to let go, basically, if it hadn't passed. I hope that makes sense. And it will be a grim picture, but I don't know how else to do it because it's parts of everybody's jobs. It's parts of everybody's salaries that frankly are being paid for with Measure I. Does that make sense?
I think finding a way to present information in tangibles and intangibles. I think that's how people actually feel them, right? In that, like, I think the way government in general is organized makes a tremendous amount of sense when you are the one having to pull the levers to make sure all the things happen, but it does not translate to general public at all.
Correct.
And so coming up with ways of, hey, look, this is our baseline. Our baseline is this, and 60% of Measure I is going to maintain in the baseline, and then the 40% we're allocating to these projects. And hey, there might make a certain amount of sense to if we do start to go into the ball fields and put more lights up or something like that. Hey, let's spend the $250 to get a 4x8 that says Measure I at work, and make sure that it's up there next to that project. But
The thing is if you want to hear expenditures by the October meeting, I won't have those things in place. In Marysville, there was a 1% sales tax that passed the year before I started there. And part of the ordinance for that sales tax was to write an annual report. And that was one of the commitments that was literally in the approved ordinance. So I did a glossy, colorful annual report for the public to show them, but it was way easier than this is going to be because we bought a fire truck and we bought new cars and we hired 2 more police officers and 2 more firefighters. And it was very clear what we did with it because we couldn't have done these extras without it. This is going to be challenging to do what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. And I know it's not what you want to hear. It's just, I don't know how I can do the kinds of extras you're talking about that we're not doing. I mean, I'm being slightly facetious, but we're gonna do the concrete apron and behind the fire department and thanks to Measure I, but that doesn't really translate into a great Measure I. We did
the
this.
quality of life doesn't go up because
Right.
the
Yeah.
apron got
No, I hear you.
Yeah,
Yeah. So,
people are thinking about it and finding a way. I understand that it's going to be difficult. And I think the methodology and how we do the math and backing into it just based off of proposed deficit to reality now, like that makes sense. But I think for it to resonate with people, it has to be like, this is how it's going to get better, or this is why this is. I don't know. It's hard.
I think that some of the better story is in future years. It's just not this year. So if I'm telling the expenditure story this year, it's not going to be great. But next year, when we can go out and purchase a engine 2 fire truck, that would never have been possible without Measure I. I can tell you that right now. So that's a next year glossy picture, your Measure I, because part of it will be that will absolutely, we would never, if Measure I didn't pass, we would never be even talking about an engine 2. But unfortunately, that's a next year story. It's not this year's story. So, and I think as years go on, there will be more of those good stories as we build up the general fund reserve and get past some of this really extreme deferred maintenance we have in the city and can do some other things that don't just feel like the meat and potatoes of running a city, but feel more like dessert. When we get to that place, there'll be more of those kinds of, we did this with Measure I.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's this year. I'm sorry. So if you want me to paint that picture for you by October, I'm happy to do it. You might not like it though.
Well, backing into it probably is really the only way to go.
Yeah.
The way that you could then say because of Measure I, we have this much that we're putting towards reserves.
And, you know, and I can realistically show the numbers because I know what
And we
it
have,
costs for a firefighter. I know what it costs for so I can realistically show you, and this adds up to 1.4 million. And this is, I mean, it's not like I'm just going to be pulling it out of thin air. I'm going to be applying real numbers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. I've got another assignment for next time.
and that would at the same time address the update on the current and pending projects like the fire truck.
Yep, we can do that. That's not. that won't
Public
be a
works equipment.
Mhm.
We're buying new telephones this year we wouldn't have been able to do that either.
No, none of the things in the budget would be, I mean, it would just all be
So we
cuts.
wouldn't have been
It
able
would have all
to
been cut.
replace the worn out phone system. We wouldn't have been able to
Correct.
do a lot of those things. And so that all that backs into it. So, okay.
That's true. We will be between now and October creating that apparatus replacement fund or a line item in the ledger for it. And we'll dump the 5,000 from the capital reserve funds into it. And so far, I don't think there's been any strike team that we could apply since the budget was approved. It's only been a couple weeks. So,
Right.
Not yet.
but moving forward, we'll start doing that so we can show you something related to that by October. And then I think the last one is really where I would say we try to have a treasurer's report for you. And then some sort of report on all of our investments, what we have, where they are, what they're, you know, what kind of terms,
That wraps
interest,
it for me.
all of that. Okay.
And as long as council approves moving the 5,000 and adjusting our reserve policy, we'll be good.
Okay. Well, we have our marching orders for next time.
Any public comment? Hearing none, it is now 6:22 and I'll adjourn the meeting.